I used a phone with no Google mobile services for a year so that I try and answer the question of whether or not it is possible. I'll be honest, when I started this, I never thought I would survive a whole year, and if I did make it, I expected it to either be a resounding yes or no. But it is actually more nuanced than that. Okay, so a little backstory. Huawei was put under trade sanctions by the US in 2019, and one of the effects of this was they were denied access to Google mobile services. Google mobile services are essentially background software features in Android that make it very easy for Android services to seamlessly be integrated into third-party apps. An example of this is maybe a ride-hailing app like Windy getting access to Google Maps for directions instead of Windy developing its own maps and keeping them up to date. It's just an easier way to do things. Since I am a stubborn Huawei fanatic, I still use their watch, I went head first and bought a Huawei Mate 40 Pro, a very high-end Huawei smartphone that does not support Google mobile services. And the first thing you do with a new smartphone is you download all your favorite apps. But without Google mobile services, you don't have access to Google Play Store, so how do you get your apps? Huawei already had its own app store called Huawei App Gallery. So this became the default place to get your apps. You can get most of the popular apps on it like WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, but beyond these, things start to get a bit tricky. Huawei's app gallery is severely understocked, and to further add to the shortage of apps, some mainstream apps were actually disappearing from Huawei's app gallery. The ones I remember vividly are Spotify, Zoom, and Duolingo. These are just some of the apps that I use. I am sure there are plenty of other apps that went the way of the ghost. Huawei was aware of this and they developed two very interesting workarounds. Workaround number one involves third-party app stores. How this worked is that for the popular apps that are not available natively in Huawei's app gallery, Huawei will give the option to download or update the app via a link to a third-party app store like APK Pure. So when you click on the app to download it or to update it, you will be clicking a link that will take you outside of Huawei's app gallery to this third-party app store where the app is located. Workaround number two is a Huawei app called Petal Search. This one has a better collection of apps that it can natively download and update, but it still does require a third-party app store for some of the apps, just like the Huawei app gallery. The situation was very much a disaster when it came to local apps. They are not popular enough to be listed on third-party app stores, so finding your local bank app or local ride-hailing app was near impossible. Some of the sites I ended up downloading these apps did not feel safe at all. This side loading process also is not recommended because you may actually download a virus instead of the app you intend to download in the first place. So some apps just won't work. A good number of Android apps rely on Google mobile services for them to work correctly. So the sort of apps that you will find and download within Huawei's app gallery are apps that do not require Google mobile services for them to run. Spoiler alert, the list is very short. Local bank apps, local food delivery apps, and Google apps all did not work. They would all give this error of this app cannot run without Google Play services. Some apps would even be dramatic and fail to install completely, which then was complicated when it came time for me to test out an app that relied on Google mobile services. There is, however, a solution for about 95% of the problems that arise from a lack of Google mobile services. It's an app called Gbox, which is a virtual machine running on top of the phone's OS. If you have ever used BlueStacks, it's the exact same concept. If you have not used BlueStacks, then let me describe Gbox for you. Got you. It's an app that operates like a virtual smartphone running on your actual phone. It'll mimic a random smartphone with Google mobile services, giving you access to the Google Play Store, which will allow you to install and run all the Google apps and almost all the apps that require Google mobile services. The only catch is this will be within Gbox. I say almost all apps because as much as I got apps like food delivery services and ride-hailing apps to work perfectly with this tool, somehow banking apps still refuse to work. The Google Play Services era disappeared, but some banking apps preferred getting the OTP code from the notifications directly instead of me entering it manually, which didn't work because Gbox could not read the contents of these notifications. App notifications of all the apps running in Gbox were also not working properly. This was not a deal breaker at all, but it did reduce the quality of experience I had with these apps. Sometimes I would get notifications late or they would just not arrive at all. Then we have certain Google services that just did not work at all, even with Gbox. Google Assistant prefers being installed at the system level, but since it is running in Gbox, which does not have that level of access to the system, it would not set up. Nearby Share also did not work for the same reasons, and I had to then look for alternatives. The alternative for assistant apps were Huawei Cilia and Amazon's Alexa. I have to say Huawei Cilia is very far from being useful at all. Alexa is much better in that regard and quite useful with IoT hardware like my smart bulb and my smart home security system. But when operating my headphones, it was utterly useless versus what I could do with Google Assistant. I love how with Google Assistant my headphones can read out notifications and I can respond to them through voice prompts on the headphones without touching my phone. It's like operating Iron Man's suit, far beyond what Alexa can do. The alternative for Nearby Share was Share It, which I am not much of a fan of with the many ads that it comes with. In the odd case that I found someone else using a Huawei as well, I used Huawei Share to send or receive files. As for banking apps, I was using USSD banking to access these services, which is a bit of a process that lacks finesse, but given the network challenges in Zimbabwe, it was the more reliable option anyway, so there was at least an upside to that. So, can you survive without Google mobile services? Because personally I feel Huawei's hardware is top tier, but is it top tier enough to compel you to ignore the shortcomings in software? I would say there are 3 levels to this. Level 1, you're a general user and you won't even notice. A typical smartphone user really is looking for general social media apps and some casual games. They will use the phone for WhatsApp, Instagram, TikTok, and the like. These are working flawlessly since such a user's smartphone habits do not revolve around Google mobile services. Such a smartphone user will be very happy with the device and will not even notice that something is missing in the software department. Level 2. You will face an issue here and there, but it's not a deal breaker given the workarounds available. You have the options of accessing some of the service via the browser. This can be Google Docs or YouTube. It is not the ideal experience, but it works and it's not that big of a deal breaker. And don't forget Gbox, which again will make plenty more apps available, further making life easier. You can feel it that getting some stuff to work takes a bit more effort, but it's within your tolerance limits. Level 3, you cannot function without Google mobile services. So you rely heavily on Google mobile services because it is a work device requirement. It's where your game progress is saved. Google Assistant is your way of life, and you are big on mobile and internet banking. You are not invested in any particular brand and you want something that just works fast free. I would say for this person, it is a complete deal breaker. They just cannot invest in the mental capacity to figure out these workarounds when a Google Pixel or a Samsung can just have everything set up for them fuss free. It is possible to live without Google mobile services, but at the end of the day, it will all depend on your software needs and habits. I could live with it, but to a point. And now I'm using a Google Pixel 6. Like and subscribe.